"Do not go home," my nephew whispered into the phone, and in that moment I knew something was terribly wrong. My name is Margaret Collins. I am 71 years old, and I had spent most of my life believing that family problems could be solved with honesty, patience, and a little bit of grace. What I did not know was that one unexpected phone call would force me to question everything I thought I understood about my own family. The call came on a Thursday afternoon as I was driving back from visiting an old friend across town. The sun was shining, traffic was light, and I was thinking about nothing more serious than what I would cook for dinner. Then my phone rang through the car speakers. When I saw Daniel Foster's name on the screen, I smiled. Daniel was my nephew, a good young man with a kind heart. We spoke often, but rarely during school hours. I answered immediately. At first he sounded nervous, unusually nervous. I asked if everything was all right. There was a long pause before he finally spoke. "Aunt Margaret, please do not go home yet." His voice was barely above a whisper. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "What are you talking about?" Another pause followed. I could hear him breathing. Then he said something that made my stomach sink. "I think there is something happening at your house, and I do not think you are supposed to know about it." My mind immediately raced through 100 possibilities. Was someone hurt? Was there an emergency? Had something happened to my son Ethan or my grandchildren Tyler and Emily? Daniel quickly reassured me that everyone was safe. That should have comforted me. Instead, it made me even more confused. If everyone was fine, why was he telling me not to go home? "Daniel, start from the beginning," I said. He hesitated again. "I cannot explain everything over the phone. I only know what I accidentally overheard." The word overheard immediately caught my attention. Daniel explained that earlier that day, he had stopped by a local coffee shop after school. By pure coincidence, he had noticed my daughter-in-law Rebecca sitting in a corner booth speaking with someone. He had not intended to listen. In fact, he said he only recognized her voice because the shop was unusually quiet. Then he heard my name. After that, he could not help paying attention. I pulled my car into a grocery store parking lot and shut off the engine. My heart was beating much faster than it should have been. "What did you hear?" I asked. Daniel lowered his voice even further. "I heard her talking about a plan. And from what I understood, you are the last person who is supposed to find out." For several seconds I simply sat there staring through the windshield. The parking lot suddenly felt very far away. Rebecca and I had always maintained a polite relationship. We were not best friends, but we were family. The idea that she might be planning something behind my back seemed impossible. Yet Daniel sounded genuinely concerned. Then he said the words that stayed with me long after the call ended. "Aunt Margaret, I think you need to be very careful before you walk into whatever is waiting for you at home." I remained in that parking lot for nearly 10 minutes after the call ended. Cars came and went around me, shopping carts rattled across the pavement, and somewhere nearby a child was laughing. Yet all I could think about were Daniel's words. A plan. My name. The last person supposed to know. None of it made sense. Rebecca had always been organized, sometimes overly organized, but secretive was not a word I would have used to describe her. As I sat there trying to calm myself, I forced my mind to focus on facts instead of fears. Daniel had not actually heard everything. He had overheard fragments of a conversation. People misunderstand things all the time. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Even so, a small voice deep inside me kept reminding me that Daniel was not the type of young man who exaggerated. If he sounded worried, there was probably a reason. Instead of driving home immediately, I called my son. Ethan answered on the second ring. His cheerful voice brought a brief sense of relief. We spoke for several minutes. He mentioned work, the children, and plans for the weekend. Everything sounded completely normal. Too normal. I carefully listened for any hint that he knew about some major family plan. There was nothing. Not a single clue. Before ending the call, I casually asked whether anything exciting was happening at home. He laughed and said the most exciting thing in his life at the moment was replacing a broken dishwasher. When the conversation ended, my confusion only grew stronger. If Rebecca was planning something significant, Ethan certainly did not sound like a man who knew about it. Eventually I started the car and headed home. During the drive, memories began surfacing. Small moments that had seemed insignificant at the time. Rebecca occasionally stepping into another room to take private phone calls. Rebecca spending more time than usual on her laptop late at night. Rebecca asking unusual questions about property values in neighboring towns. I had noticed these things without truly paying attention to them. Now every memory felt different. By the time I arrived home, the house looked exactly as it always did. Tyler was shooting basketballs in the driveway. Emily sat on the front porch working on a school project. The sight immediately eased some of my anxiety. Nothing appeared wrong. Nothing appeared unusual. Yet as I walked toward the house, Emily smiled and ran over to hug me. During our conversation, she mentioned something curious. "Mom has been really busy planning lately," she said. I asked what she meant. Emily shrugged. "I do not know. She keeps saying everything will make sense soon." The comment lasted only seconds, but it lodged itself firmly in my mind. Everything will make sense soon. That evening at dinner, I quietly observed everyone around the table. Ethan seemed relaxed. The children were happy. Rebecca appeared calm and confident. If she was carrying some secret plan, she hid it remarkably well. Then just before dessert, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and for the briefest moment, I saw a look of concern cross her face. It vanished almost immediately, but I noticed it. And for the first time since Daniel's phone call, I began to suspect that whatever was happening had already started moving forward. The next morning, I woke up with the uncomfortable feeling that I had missed something important. It was not a specific detail. It was more like a loose thread hanging from a sweater, the kind that quietly demands attention until you finally pull on it. As I sat in the kitchen drinking coffee, I replayed every part of my conversation with Daniel. One sentence kept returning to me. He had said he overheard Rebecca talking about a plan, but he had never actually told me what the plan was. In all the confusion and worry, I had focused on the warning instead of the details. That realization pushed me to call him after school that afternoon. Daniel answered immediately. This time he sounded calmer. I apologized for questioning him again, but explained that I needed to understand exactly what he had heard. There was a long pause before he spoke. "I did not hear everything," he said, "but I heard enough to know it was about your family." I listened carefully as he described the conversation. Rebecca had been meeting with a woman he did not recognize. At first they discussed schedules and paperwork. Nothing unusual. Then he heard Rebecca mention Ethan by name. According to Daniel, the woman asked whether Ethan had agreed yet. Rebecca responded with a sentence that immediately caught my attention. "Not yet. He cannot know until everything is ready." I felt a chill run through me. Ethan cannot know until everything is ready. The words sounded deliberate. Planned. Daniel continued. He said Rebecca then mentioned timelines and deadlines. Several times she referred to the children. She also talked about needing to avoid unnecessary complications. The conversation lasted less than 20 minutes before both women left. Daniel admitted he might have misunderstood parts of it, but one thing was clear. Rebecca seemed deeply involved in organizing something important without Ethan's knowledge. After ending the call, I sat quietly for a long time. My first instinct was to confront Rebecca directly. Any mother would want answers after hearing something like that. Yet another part of me knew confrontation without evidence often creates more problems than solutions. If there truly was a secret plan, accusing her too early could simply drive everything further. Underground. Over the next few days, I became more observant than ever before. I noticed Rebecca checking her email constantly. I noticed several envelopes arriving in the mail that she immediately placed in her home office. I noticed her making notes in a planner she rarely allowed out of her sight. None of these actions were suspicious by themselves. Together, however, they formed a pattern that was becoming impossible to ignore. Then on Friday evening, another clue appeared unexpectedly. Emily was showing me photos on her tablet from a recent school event. As she scrolled through pictures, a notification briefly appeared at the top of the screen. It disappeared almost instantly, but not before I saw part of the message. Application received. Emily did not notice my reaction. She simply continued showing pictures of friends and teachers. Yet my thoughts immediately began racing. Application for what? School? Housing? Employment? The possibilities were endless. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I found myself staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The pieces were slowly coming together, but the overall picture remained frustratingly incomplete. Still, one fact was becoming impossible to deny. Rebecca was working towards something significant. The children were somehow involved. Ethan appeared unaware. And whatever this plan was, it seemed to be moving forward faster than anyone realized. The following Monday brought the first real opportunity to learn more. It arrived completely by accident. Rebecca had taken the children to school and rushed off to a meeting. Ethan had already left for work. I was alone in the house enjoying a quiet morning with a cup of tea, when I noticed a stack of mail sitting on the kitchen counter. Normally, I never paid attention to anyone else's correspondence. Privacy mattered. Boundaries mattered. Yet one envelope lying face up immediately caught my eye because it displayed the logo of a school district I did not recognize. My pulse quickened. The same phrase from Emily's tablet flashed through my mind. Application received. I forced myself to look away. The envelope remained unopened, and I had no intention of crossing that line. Still, its existence raised even more questions. Why would educational mail from another district be arriving here? Later that afternoon, I met my longtime friend Linda Parker for coffee. Linda had known me for over 30 years and possessed a remarkable ability to see through confusion. Without revealing every detail, I explained what had been happening. The phone call from Daniel, the secret of conversations, the paperwork, the strange comments from the children. Linda listened carefully before asking a simple question. Have you considered that Rebecca might believe she is helping everyone? The thought caught me off guard. Until that moment, I had been so focused on secrecy that I had never seriously considered motivation. What if Rebecca genuinely believed she was acting in the family's best interest? The possibility complicated everything. Yet even if her intentions were good, hiding major decisions from Ethan remained difficult to justify. That evening, another clue appeared unexpectedly. After dinner, Tyler asked his father a question that instantly captured my attention. Dad, if we moved somewhere with mountains, would I still get to play baseball? The room went silent. Ethan looked genuinely surprised. Moved where? Tyler shrugged. I do not know. Mom talks about it sometimes. For a brief moment, I thought Rebecca might finally explain everything. Instead, she smiled and changed the subject. The reaction was subtle but impossible to miss. Ethan seemed puzzled. Tyler looked confused. Only Rebecca appeared prepared for the conversation. Later that night, I sat awake thinking about everything that had happened. Piece by piece, the picture was becoming clearer. There was definitely a plan involving relocation. The children knew fragments of it. Rebecca was actively preparing for it. Ethan appeared almost completely unaware. Then a new question surfaced. Why was she keeping it from him? That question bothered me more than any other. If this was simply about a future move, why all the secrecy? Why the private meetings, the hidden paperwork, the conversations that apparently excluded her own husband? The next morning I was walking past Rebecca's home office when I noticed the door had not fully closed. Through the narrow opening, I could see papers spread across her desk. Most were impossible to read from where I stood. Then one page shifted slightly beneath the air conditioning vent. A bold heading became visible for just a second. Relocation Transition Plan. I froze. Every suspicion I had carried for days suddenly felt real. Whatever Rebecca was organizing was no longer a possibility. It was an active plan. And for reasons I still did not understand, my son remained almost entirely in the dark. After seeing that heading on Rebecca's desk, I spent the rest of the day trying to act normal. It was becoming increasingly difficult. Every conversation felt layered with hidden meaning. Every ordinary family moment seemed connected to a larger picture that I still could not fully see. More than once I considered speaking directly to Ethan. Yet something stopped me each time. I had suspicions, observations, and fragments of information, but I still lacked certainty. If I approached him too soon, I risked damaging relationships without understanding the truth. So I waited. 2 days later, an unexpected opportunity arrived. Rebecca volunteered to pick up several supplies for one of Emily's school projects and asked if I could stay with the children until she returned. Ethan was still at work. For nearly 2 hours, the house was quiet except for the sounds of homework and television. At one point, Emily went upstairs to find art supplies while Tyler worked on a science assignment at the kitchen table. As I helped him organize his notes, he casually mentioned something that immediately caught my attention. Mom keeps asking us what kind of places we would like to live someday. I looked up. What do you mean? Tyler shrugged. She shows us pictures sometimes. Mountains, lakes, different towns. My heart sank. Does your father look at them too? Tyler shook his head. Usually it is just us. The answer lingered in my thoughts long after the conversation ended. Later that evening, another clue surfaced. Rebecca received a large envelope in the mail. She appeared excited when she opened it. I noticed several colorful brochures inside before she quickly gathered everything and carried it into her office. What struck me was not her reaction. It was Ethan's. He barely glanced at the package. Once again, he seemed completely unaware that something significant was happening around him. The following morning, I found myself remembering Daniel's warning. At the time, I assumed the secret involved me directly. Now I was beginning to suspect something larger. What if I was only part of the equation? What if the real secret centered on Ethan and the children? That possibility became even stronger a few days later. I was helping Emily clean out her backpack when a folded paper slipped onto the floor. Instinctively, I picked it up to hand it back to her. Before I could do so, a heading caught my eye. Student transfer information. My pulse quickened. Emily immediately reached for the paper. Mom said that is not important yet, she said innocently. Not important yet. The words echoed through my mind. After she left the room, I sat alone for several minutes trying to process everything. School district brochures, transfer information, relocation plans, private meetings, secret applications. The evidence was no longer pointing in multiple directions. It was pointing toward one destination. Rebecca was preparing for a move. A serious move. A move involving the children. Yet the question that mattered most remained unanswered. Why was Ethan being kept in the dark? That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, I watched my son laugh with Tyler and help Emily solve a math problem. Looking at him, I felt a growing sense of concern. Because if my suspicions were correct, then the person who stood to be most shocked by Rebecca's plan was not me. It was Ethan himself. The breakthrough came on a rainy Wednesday evening. Until then, every clue had pointed in the same direction, yet none of them provided certainty. I knew Rebecca was planning something. I knew the children were involved. I knew Ethan seemed unaware. But I still did not know the full truth. That changed when chance intervened. The weather had turned miserable that afternoon. Heavy rain tapped against the windows, while dark clouds settled over the neighborhood. Ethan arrived home early from work because a client meeting had been canceled. Rebecca, meanwhile, was delayed across town after one of her appointments ran longer than expected. For the first time in weeks, Ethan found himself sorting through the day's mail alone. I was sitting in the living room reading when I heard him call out from the kitchen. His voice sounded puzzled. Mom, have you ever heard of Summit Ridge Academy? My heart immediately skipped a beat. I set my book down and walked into the kitchen. Ethan was holding a thick envelope. The logo printed across the front matched one of the brochures I had previously seen on Rebecca's desk. Trying to remain calm, I asked what it was. Ethan opened the packet and began flipping through the pages. The confusion on his face deepened with every sheet he examined. This says thank you for your application submission, he said slowly. Application for what? I asked. He shook his head. That is exactly what I am trying to figure out. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then Ethan reached a page that caused him to freeze completely. His eyes moved across the document twice before he looked up at me. Mom! His voice had changed. This application includes Tyler and Emily. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Ethan continued reading. The packet contained enrollment information, housing recommendations, relocation resources, and introductory material for families moving into the area. Everything I had suspected was sitting there in black and white. Yet the most shocking detail was still to come. Ethan turned another page and frowned. This application was submitted almost 4 months ago. For months. The number hit both of us at the same time. For months of planning. For months of paperwork. For months during which my son apparently knew nothing. Before either of us could say another word, the front door opened. Rebecca stepped inside carrying shopping bags and an umbrella. The moment she saw the packet in Ethan's hands, all color seemed to drain from her face. Nobody needed to explain anything. Her reaction explained enough. Ethan slowly placed the papers on the kitchen table. He was not angry. He was not shouting. If anything, he looked deeply hurt. "Rebecca," he said quietly, "why am I finding out about this from the mail?" The question hung in the air between them. For a long moment Rebecca said nothing. Then she set her bags down and pulled out a chair. The expression on her face told me she understood that the secret was finally over. Whatever plan she had been building could no longer remain hidden. As I stood there watching them, one realization became impossible to ignore. The person most excluded from Rebecca's plan had never been me. It had been her own husband. And as Ethan sat across from her waiting for answers, I knew the conversation about to begin would change the future of this family forever. For several seconds after Ethan asked his question, nobody moved. Rain continued tapping softly against the windows while the kitchen seemed frozen in time. Rebecca sat down slowly and folded her hands together. I could see that she had rehearsed many conversations in her mind over the past few months, but this was clearly not how she expected any of them to begin. Ethan remained standing beside the table, the enrollment packet still open in front of him. His expression was calm, yet there was a sadness in his eyes that immediately broke my heart. "I am listening," he said quietly. Rebecca took a deep breath before speaking. What followed surprised me. She did not deny anything. She did not make excuses. Instead, she admitted that she had spent almost a year researching possible places for the family to live. She explained that concerns about the children's future had gradually become an obsession. She wanted stronger schools, safer neighborhoods, and more opportunities. At first, she had only gathered information. Then she began comparing communities. Eventually she started contacting schools and requesting materials. According to her, every step felt small when viewed individually. Yet those small steps slowly became a detailed plan. Ethan listened without interrupting. When she finally finished, he asked the question that mattered most. "Why did you keep it from me?" Rebecca lowered her eyes. "Because I was afraid." The answer caught all of us by surprise. She explained that she worried Ethan would immediately reject the idea. She feared conflict. She feared disappointing him. Most of all, she feared that years of research would be dismissed before she could fully explain her reasoning. So she convinced herself that she would tell him later. Then later became months. Months became nearly a year. Before long, she was carrying a secret that had grown far larger than she ever intended. Ethan sat down across from her. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Finally, he shook his head slowly. "You were planning our future without me." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "I was trying to protect our future." The distinction mattered to her. Yet I could also see why it no longer mattered to Ethan. Good intentions do not erase secrecy. As their conversation continued, more details emerged. The applications had not been final decisions. No house had been purchased. No move had been scheduled. Rebecca had simply built a complete roadmap in case she decided to pursue the opportunity. Yet even that explanation left Ethan shaken. The issue was no longer relocation. It was trust. Hours passed as the discussion continued. At one point, Tyler and Emily came downstairs, sensing the unusual atmosphere. Rebecca immediately reassured them that everything was fine. In many ways, she was right. The family was not falling apart. No emergency existed. Yet something important had changed forever. Hidden plans were no longer hidden. Eventually, after the children returned upstairs, Ethan looked at Rebecca and spoke with remarkable calm. "From this moment forward, there are no more secret plans." Rebecca nodded immediately. "Agreed." As I watched them, I realized that Daniel's warning had arrived at exactly the right time. Not because it exposed a dangerous scheme, because it prevented a growing silence from becoming something much worse. And for the first time since that unexpected phone call, I began to believe that this family still had a chance to find its way back to one another. The days that followed felt different. Not perfect. Not magically repaired. But different. For the first time in many months, everything was finally out in the open. There were no hidden applications, no secret research projects, and no private plans developing behind closed doors. Instead, there were conversations. Long conversations. Honest conversations. Sometimes uncomfortable conversations. Yet they were exactly what the family needed. Ethan and Rebecca began setting aside time each evening after the children went to bed. They reviewed every document together. Every school brochure. Every relocation report. Every note and timeline that Rebecca had spent months creating. To her credit, she shared everything without hesitation. Nothing remained hidden. The more Ethan learned, the more complicated his feelings became. On one hand, he appreciated the effort Rebecca had invested in researching opportunities for the family. On the other hand, he struggled with the fact that so much of it had happened without his knowledge. The issue was no longer about moving. It was about partnership. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after the truth came out, I happened to overhear a conversation from the back porch. Neither of them realized I was nearby. Ethan was speaking quietly. "I am not upset that you looked at possibilities," he said. "I am upset that you carried the entire burden by yourself." The statement surprised me. Rebecca was silent for a moment before answering. "I thought I was helping." Ethan nodded. "I know. But families are not supposed to work that way." Those words stayed with me long after the conversation ended. Families are not supposed to work that way. It was such a simple truth, yet so many problems begin when people forget it. Around the same time, the children started asking questions of their own. Tyler wanted to know whether they were actually moving. Emily wondered why everyone had seemed stressed lately. Rather than avoiding the topic, Ethan and Rebecca sat down with them and explained everything in age-appropriate terms. There would be no immediate move. No sudden changes. The family was simply discussing options together. Watching that conversation unfold brought me an unexpected sense of relief. Secrets create uncertainty. Transparency creates stability. The children seemed visibly calmer once they understood what was happening. A few days later, Rebecca approached me privately while the children were at school. We sat together at the kitchen table where so many important conversations had taken place over the years. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she looked directly at me. "I owe you an apology." Her voice was sincere. She admitted that she had allowed fear and anxiety to guide too many of her decisions. Instead of trusting the people around her, she tried to control every outcome herself. The result was exactly the opposite of what she wanted. Rather than protecting her family, she created distance within it. I listened carefully before reaching across the table and taking her hand. "You made mistakes," I said gently. "But mistakes can be corrected when people are willing to face them." Tears filled her eyes. Not dramatic tears. Just quiet emotion from someone who finally understood the consequences of carrying too much alone. As I looked at her, I realized that the real conflict had never been between a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law. It had been between fear and trust. And little by little, trust was beginning to win. For the first time since Daniel's warning call, I truly believed that this family was moving toward something better than the future anyone had secretly planned on their own. Several months later, I found myself sitting in the same backyard where so many important conversations had taken place. The air was warm, the sky was clear, and the sounds of laughter drifted across the lawn. Tyler was tossing a baseball with his father. Emily was helping Rebecca arrange flowers on the patio table. Looking at them, it was difficult to believe how much had changed since that unexpected phone call from Daniel. In the end, the family never made a rushed decision. Instead of following a secret plan, Ethan and Rebecca chose a different path. They spent months reviewing options together. They visited communities as a family. They discussed schools, finances, and long-term goals openly. Every major decision was shared. Every concern was discussed. What had once been hidden became part of an honest conversation. The relocation idea itself eventually changed. Some opportunities that initially seemed exciting turned out to be less practical. Other possibilities appeared that nobody had considered before. Yet that no longer mattered. The destination was never the real issue. The process was. For the first time in a long time, everyone was moving forward together instead of separately. One afternoon, Ethan surprised me by asking if I wanted to join him for coffee. We sat at a small cafe not far from the neighborhood. During our conversation, he reflected on everything that had happened. I spent a long time thinking about why I never noticed any of it, he admitted. I listened quietly. He explained that trust had always come naturally to him. He assumed that if there was something important to discuss, it would eventually be discussed. What he learned was that communication requires more than assumptions. It requires participation. It requires attention. Most importantly, it requires courage from everyone involved. Later that same week, Rebecca stopped by my house alone. She brought homemade cookies and stayed for nearly 2 hours. We talked about family, parenting, and the mistakes people make when fear begins making decisions for them. Before leaving, she said something I will never forget. I spent so much time planning for the future that I almost damaged the people I was trying to protect. The honesty in her voice told me how deeply she understood that lesson. By then, my relationship with her had changed as well. We were not perfect. No family is. But we understood each other better than we ever had before. The suspicion and uncertainty were gone. In their place was something far more valuable: respect. A few weeks after that, Daniel visited during a family barbecue. At one point, he pulled me aside and asked whether everything had worked out. I smiled and assured him that it had. Then I thanked him. He looked confused. For what? He asked. For making that phone call, I replied. Daniel laughed nervously and admitted he almost never called because he worried he might be mistaken. The thought made me smile. Sometimes a single conversation changes everything. As the evening sun settled across the backyard, I watched my family gather around the patio table. There was laughter, conversation, and the comfortable feeling that comes from people who genuinely enjoy being together. In that moment, I finally understood what had been saved. It was not a house. It was not a relocation plan. It was not even a secret. It was trust. Trust that had been tested, damaged, and ultimately rebuilt. And as I looked around at the people I loved, I realized that was worth far more than any plan anyone could have created behind a closed door.